Okay, quick disclaimer, this video did not end up aging well. I was working on it, the whole video was kinda about how Pixar fell off. I talked about Elemental's bad promotion and box office flop. But then recently, it kind of redeemed itself in the box office, so that kind of makes half of this video's subject irrelevant. But I still have some good points, so enjoy anyway. Well, hey guys, Awesomemay here, and you know, there has been this intense hate for Pixar lately. I don't know where it sparked, but everybody is no longer giving the studio the benefit of the doubt despite being surprised every time. People hated on Luca before it came out, that was a good movie. People hated pretty insanely for turning red, that was also a good movie. People hated on Lightyear, and that wasn't a good movie, but it feels like as of lately, Pixar is the only studio that can't get away with doing bad projects here and there. Whereas I guess we're just used to other studios putting out duds so much, it isn't as important to us. Like, I've seen people go on and say, oh my gosh, Illumination and Sony and DreamWorks are destroying Pixar. The underdogs are finally winning, completely forgetting how many bad movies these three studios have also made before. But because they put out one good one, they're suddenly leagues above Pixar. Like, yes, Sony Animation gave us Spider-Verse, it was so good, but they also gave us the Emoji Movie. You can't tell me they are any better than Pixar. And I don't know if I'm sad because I grew up with Pixar and seeing them not succeed is like my childhood not continuing. I don't like change, so a world where Pixar isn't the powerhouse makes me depressed for some reason. But I've stated it before that I don't think it's entirely the public's fault. Marketing for Disney and Pixar has been on the downfall. They reused this cloud in Elemental in every single poster. They accidentally tweeted this during the California wildfires. Then they put up this fake realistic fire hydrant sticker. Somebody is going to die because of this. Also, just a personal bias, but they marketed Claude in almost every poster and cardboard cutout just for him to be in 3 scenes max. I'm not joking. This is the only scene where this kid says more than one sentence. Somebody needs to find whoever is in charge of marketing at Disney and Pixar and needs to fire them immediately. So it begs the question that if these studios aren't confident in their own movies enough to make them look good in the trailers, then you can't really blame people for not being confident to see the movie. I'm a big believer in going and seeing a movie and then deciding if it's good or bad, but we're in a time where so much stuff comes out, it's really just on the movie's makers to make you feel interested. If I have to do it with my video titles and thumbnails, this company should too. I also think Pixar is having a harder time than usual with so many new movies coming out all at once that embrace a new visual style, and Pixar has really gotten used to this cartoony but still 3D animation lately that it feels like they can't get out of it. And even if they were to decide to go back to having more realistic new styles for movies, the general public won't get to see that they're doing that until like in 4 years because that's how long a movie takes. So if they don't have a very visually new stylistic movie in the works, they're kind of screwed in the eyes of the public for a couple of years, and that kind of sucks. Now, if we didn't have Spider-Verse 2 and Puss in Boots 2 and Mutant Mayhem coming out, I think Pixar would be a little less targeted, because a lot of the hate I've seen for Elemental, almost 50 times out of 50, it's a person with a Spider-Verse, or Puss in Boots, or Mario movie profile picture, solely just hating to continue the hype of whatever movie they're liking at the moment, and it's not really because they hate Pixar. And it seems like Pixar got so confident with being at the top of animation that they stopped improving, so meanwhile all these other studios were slowly getting the hang on animation and then continuing it with new styles, all under the Pixar nose. But that's enough with the general topic on Pixar. You didn't come here to just hear me talk about Pixar's history. I'm sure there's a documentary out there you can watch. Today we're going to be reviewing Pixar's new movie, an animated romance about elements, very original, Elemental. I saw this in theaters opening day. I got to witness the awesome Elemental posters they had plastered in the theater everywhere. I got to see Claude. I want to kill him. So I'm gonna dive into what I thought about this movie and why I think recent Pixar doesn't work as well. Like, subscribe, let's get into it. This was a long intro, what the heck? Starting off with the opening, something that Pixar has been known to do best. The way they set up their stories and characters can sometimes be really creative and sometimes very cheesy. Elemental surprisingly has actually one of the strongest openings out of all the recent Pixar movies. I thought the opening to Turning Red was a little too fast, and the opening to Luca was a little too vacant and spread out. Elemental has one of the strongest openings out of all the recent Pixar movies. It does such a good job with the backstory of Elemental, and it felt really cozy, really Studio Ghibli-esque. You can really tell with the recent Pixar movies that Pixar is really inspired by Studio Ghibli. I think it might be the reason for the bean mouths. You could tell me this was a Studio Ghibli character, and I would believe you. This lamp kind of throws me off in this scene. It looks like a prop you would see in Wizards 101, but overall I think this part does a good job setting it up as a not generic metaphor story because these characters do actually evolve. and the element jokes in the beginning don't feel as forced as they are in the rest of the film. I actually thought them speaking a made-up language was really funny. My only problem with the first act of this movie is that it does a very half job when it comes to setting up the actual problems these characters face. I think it juggles a lot of Ember's problems all at once that I feel as an audience I got confused to what was the main issue in the story, because at first it was water people being the issue, but then water people come into the shop and hang around, and Ember seems to get more mad at the actual fire people, so that's confusing. And then I think it's Ember working that's the problem, but apparently she wanted to work. And then we're introduced to Wade, where he becomes the problem with the letters he has, and he's like super stubborn about it. But then that whole stubborn character trait completely disappears when Ember sheds one tear. So what? I may have got that whole part wrong, I don't know. The music in the beginning of this movie feels very timeless, and you can feel the classic Inside Out and Up instrumental vibe show through. The music feels so freeing and angelic, it's hard to explain. I felt like I was descending into a new realm. And also there's a lot of character designs I really like that I wish they showed more of. This guy looks really funny. This guy looks really cool. I really like this guy. The character designs are so much better than the ones we saw in the trailer. Like, my only thought watching this movie was how badly it was done in promotion. There are so many cute and wholesome moments that focus more on these two characters, Ember and Wade, and it explores their two very different lives and mindsets so well just in the opening act. But no, all we got to see in the trailers were the generic element jokes. That's another part I want to get into. A lot of the jokes in this movie are very weirdly forced. The dialogue outside of Ember and Wade feels very forgetful. It feels like they wrote the lines down as temporary filler while they worked on the script, but then they just forgot to take them out, I guess. And this would be fine if it kept moving. There's a lot of loose air after these puns, and it made me uncomfortable.
You're so hot.
Especially the water element crying joke. That was like the only joke I really liked, but then they just overdid it. And I think this sucks the most because there are so many creative gags you could do with elements that aren't on the nose as much, if you really thought about it deeply. Like, Pixar used to be known for having such good gags with these blank world movies. Like, if you look back to Monsters, Inc., there are so many fun ideas they played with, and they had even more they scrapped in the storyboard room. But this was the best they could come up with for a world literally about elements. Another one of my biggest issues with Elemental, I just want to get out right off the bat, is that it feels like the comedy and the emotional beats are trying too hard to have the spotlight, that it doesn't clash well timing-wise, because it'll have these very silly, goofy, cute moments, and then insert this really personal, heart-wrenching character motivation, which I think works 1,000 times better than the comedy parts. But the emotional beats don't get to shine through as much as I would want them to because this movie tries so hard to be funny and tries to utilize the gags with the elements, when it really isn't as interesting as the main character's chemistry and personal storyline. Like, these characters are the best part of this movie. I want to see as much as we can of them. If you would have scrapped some of these cloud jokes and amplified the character moments, I would have came out so much happier with this film. Although I will make an exception for the basketball scene. That was actually really cute. I smiled in the theater. That was sweet. I'm not heartless. I also think because this movie spends so much time trying to create jokes that don't work, it also makes the moments we do get with Wade and Ember feel kind of forced. Although this is more of a personal complaint because I can't take animation relationships seriously. I didn't feel like they had enough time to be so in love with each other as this movie stated, but that's not really the movie's fault. It's hard to show the progress of two characters falling in love in an hour and 30 minutes. But when she did confess her intense love for Wade, I felt like we didn't get enough of them actually getting to know each other for it to feel warranted. It was too distracted with the puns, but like I said, that might just be me not being able to take things seriously. I think other than all that, I think the romantic moments are perfect. They should have made the romance aspect the core focus of the marketing because that's essentially what makes this movie stand out above a Pixar movie and above being another Lightyear. It does a really good job being Pixar's first more focused romance-themed movie, other than maybe WALL-E. The moment where Wade and Ember hold hands was so well done and perfect for this movie, and the animation was so cool. I was obsessed with the look of the water in this movie. You guys know me. I am the Pixar water guy. And this movie has literal water as the main character, so you know it was going to be up my alley in the Pixar water department. I think the big difference that this movie has compared with other Pixar movies, however, is that it feels very much like it's hitting story beats that the creators had set up for it, and less does it go out of its path to surprise you. But I wouldn't say it's too out of character of Pixar. Inside Out had also a lot of expected jokes, but I think the concept of Inside Out was already so unique and different to begin with. That kind of made up for it. Whereas an Element concept has been done to the ground, you kind of have to try harder for a story like that. Every child's first OC was probably a grass guy or a water ninja. You guys remember that cool math game? You know I was gonna mention. And sadly, the good characters can't hold this movie up on their own because of the lackluster story. There isn't as much motivation for you to watch till the end as much as other Pixar movies. I want to get into why I think recent Pixar hasn't been working as well as their prime, so strap in to disagree or agree. I don't know, this is just a guess. First of all, I do think the pandemic and Pixar putting all their movies on Disney Plus started painting them as less of a blockbuster studio and more of a streaming studio under Disney's umbrella. Even as we were getting close to the end of the pandemic, they were still putting their movies on Disney Plus. And it felt like Disney was kind of pushing them to the side in this era, in terms of promotion, in terms of everything. So when Pixar did come back to theaters, they didn't feel as much as of an event to go see as they used to. Also, I will never get over the fact they came back to theaters with a movie like Lightyear and not a movie like Luca or Turning Red. But I don't think this is entirely the case because people had full-on discussions on Twitter how they missed seeing Pixar movies in theaters, and they were very sad about Turning Red and Luca not being on the big screen like they deserve, so that can't be it. Or maybe it's because the ones that they are putting out in theaters now aren't as interesting. I don't know, that might be it. I think the stories that Pixar are telling recently are still very under the Pixar generic ideas. People joke all the time that their stories are really just, what if blank had emotions? What if elements had emotions? What if cars had emotions? What if bugs had emotions? What if a teenage girl had emotions and the movie was about the emotions? And that has very much been their style, and the difference between them doing this now and doing it in the early 2000s is because that level of story wasn't considered generic in animated movies when they first debuted. Everything they put out which would be kind of generic now was revolutionary back then. We never saw an animated movie about toys or an animated movie about a monster world, at least none that were like Pixar. And they had a big playing field with those types of stories because they had a head start in 3D animation, and other studios had yet to get there to level the playing field in terms of 3D stories, so they really could have made the most simple concepts back then and it still would have felt new for animation. But with so many animated movies now that are having almost live action level stories and plots and plot twists, I think we've pushed the boundaries past having a simple story so it's easier to animate. So maybe a story about elements would have been a 2000s classic. It feels kind of watered down compared to recent masterpieces like Lego Movie, Rango, Puss in Boots 2. Not saying Elemental is a bad movie at all. It's way more than what the basic storyline is, and it feels like classic Pixar people love despite having that bean mouth character style. So I'm not here to say there's any reason these movies are bad because they're not bad. I'm just explaining why they haven't popped out as much as older Pixar movies. Now, obviously, Pixar movies wouldn't work if it was just these generic basic ideas I stated. A lot of Pixar movies work because of their character building. Toy Story does not work because it's about toys that come to life. It works because of the genius dynamic of Buzz and Woody. Monsters, Inc. doesn't work because it's about monsters. It works because it's about a monster who realizes he cares for much more than himself and gets fatherly fulfillment out of taking care of Boo. And it's so sweet. And I don't think Pixar has lost that level of storytelling either. Luca had some of the best characters I have seen in an animated movie, period. And there was such a deeper friendship explored in that movie. So in terms of actual character creations, Pixar still creates really exciting and emotional characters you can relate to. That aspect hasn't gone anywhere either. But the balance of having a good story and good characters has been outweighed by Pixar making really good characters, but not too interesting overall stories. Like, yes, the world in Luca is awesome, I could watch it for hours, but the plot and motivations are nowhere near as strong as they used to be in Pixar movies. I think the main difference between the recent stories and the older stories is specifically story reward. It's something I have suspicion Pixar no longer cares about or thinks of with the pushing of new stories. Reward is the reason for you to stick with a story. It's the main motivation that makes us want to finish till the end, and it's my biggest gripe with recent Pixar. They reached their prime with this with Coco and Inside Out, where you would have this character struggling with something and going on this personal journey, and you can feel the rise of tension until the very end where it all just bursts, and that's when we get the satisfying conclusion. With Inside Out, it was when Riley finally felt comfortable letting out her feelings and realizing the importance of sadness. In Coco, it was when Miguel finally got to sing to Coco and get some justice for Hector. But if you think about recent Pixar movies, there hasn't been a satisfying ending to any of them. This doesn't make them bad movies, but it does explain why after finishing a recent Pixar movie, you feel kind of lost and like you wasted your time despite enjoying watching it, like something's missing. With Luca, the buildup of the story was getting the Vespa and finally living a normal life, and although that wasn't a very hooking mission, they just ended up scrapping it anyway at the end and Luca just went to school. There wasn't enough buildup of this for the conclusion to feel satisfying in my opinion. And Elemental does this to the extreme. This movie doesn't take its time to build up anything for you to feel satisfied at the end when it's done. The mission for them to stop the flood is more of a filler story, and Ember standing up to her father doesn't seem as important either because they really didn't build up her dad being that mad at her in the first place. So when that does happen, it feels very forced, and them getting on the boat and just dipping was a very non-conclusive ending. So when the movie was over, I felt very incomplete. Here's my genius writer idea for an ending to Elemental that I think would be better. I think it would have been really good if they showed Ember and Wade showing their affection on the train and people looking at them weirdly at first. And then we see other mixed element couples on the train feel more comfortable to show their affection. That would have been such a good ending, and they could have used all the scrapped main character concepts. It would have showed the future of this story so much better, but instead we get a very rushed ending that goes by so fast you look in one direction and you miss it. And I feel like with a ton of recent Pixar movies, the end feels like something they quickly wrote because they had to do it, and not like they had actual ideas. I didn't mention Turning Red because this is a Pixar movie I feel in recent age other than Soul actually did capture that lead up of tension that left you with a conclusion that feels like you actually watched a movie. And Turning Red, unlike the other recent ones, actually takes most of its time to focus on the character dynamics and the problems. So when they conclude all those storylines, it doesn't feel as forced in the end. Instead of like Elemental and Luca and Lightyear where there are so many random occurrences, the main moral kind of gets washed to the side or forgotten. Also, Pixar kind of has this thing of introducing a new character trait for one of their characters that completely ruins their personality for the rest of the film. Like, I'm sorry for putting Luca under the bus so much, I love that movie for what it was. But when they introduced the jealousy aspect of Alberto, that became his entire personality for half of the film, and it was so annoying. I also realize as I'm talking about recent Pixar, I totally forget Lightyear exists sometimes. I genuinely sometimes forget that that was a movie Pixar put out. It does not feel real. It's so weird too, because I remember in 2017 seeing the first announcement and being like, oh my god, this is gonna be life-changing. And it was the most nothing movie I have ever seen. The problem that Lightyear faces is very different from the other recent ones, and that is the fact that it has no redeeming qualities when it comes to characters or story. I think it was just Pixar being overly confused with why people liked Buzz Lightyear. They were like, well, people like Buzz so much and there's so many theories about his backstory, let's explore it. Completely forgetting that Buzz only works in the Toy Story universe. He doesn't work because he's an astronaut. Like I said earlier, he works because of his dynamic with Woody, and the comedy of him being such an optimistic toy. So when you take that away, you just get a boring astronaut story that has no necessary reason to even call it Lightyear. They could have used the budget of Lightyear to make an actual interesting sci-fi movie like WALL-E. Buzz Lightyear not being a toy makes him just a very boring character, and nothing besides socks in this movie makes you feel anything other than, wow, it's a movie. This movie was another reason Pixar started getting a bad light in the public. Lightyear felt so desperate to be a box office hit that it kind of morphed Pixar more into Disney's brand. Whereas a couple years ago, Pixar was still considered as the good side of Disney, but I wouldn't say that's entirely Pixar's fault. Disney has become such a terrible company that it's almost impossible for Pixar not to be roped into that because they're associated and under the branch of Disney. Also, quick rant, but don't even get me started how the Pixar CEO Pete Docter, amazing director, said that he wants to do a lot more sequels. Why would you say that? Why would you admit to that? I've seen many times that Pixar has stated that sequels are mandatory to keep their company afloat and to have that nice pad to land back on when they're struggling, but you would think they would learn that sequels aren't an instant money hack after Lightyear. Like, yes, I'm super excited for Inside Out 2. I think that can work. But it also shows how unconfident Pixar has been in their own original movies that it's hard for an audience to be confident and go see these movies. Also, Pixar doesn't even have that many movies for them to be this confident in sequels. Half of their lineup already are sequels. You only have a few movies left. And I don't think A Good Dinosaur 2 would be a good idea, so you need to reconsider. You say this like people don't want new movies. It's your fault for not properly promoting your original movie. Am I being harsh? I can't tell if I'm being really obnoxious. I hope not. Thankfully, a lot of this was said when Elemental was kind of flopping, so Pete Docter was like, oh my gosh, I need to save this. We are going down. But then a couple weeks later, after I started working on this video, it started doing pretty well in the box office, hitting 300 million. And it went from being the worst opening for Pixar to the best animated original movie opening since the pandemic. So since Elemental did a huge 180 and Elio will probably perform well, hopefully that gives Pixar more confidence in their original movies. And despite everything I've said in this video negative about Pixar, there's still a lot more room for Pixar movies. And I don't want to single out Pixar because it feels like a lot of studios are struggling. For example, even Sony Animation Pictures did an amazing job with Across the Spider-Verse, and yet also had issues, maybe even worse than Pixar's. So in conclusion, I feel if Pixar can flesh out their movies' motivations and endings more, and get more confidence with marketing and just original ideas in general, they can slowly get back on their feet and hit a new golden era that's maybe even better if they start experimenting with styles. And you can't deny a lot of the hate for the studio is recency and hive mind related. After Elemental started picking up in theaters, I saw half the people that complained about the movie switch up almost immediately. So a lot of the so-called Pixar fall off is really just people being negative to be negative, and some people will make really strong opinions even if they don't agree with it because it gets attention. And the other half of the Pixar issue is marketing, and of course my personal issues with the way they end their movies recently. So basically I'm saying I still love Pixar, I would work with them any day, I would do anything for them. Pixar, please produce the Awesomemay movie. Hey guys, that's the end of this video. I hope you liked it. A lot of things changed since a month ago when I started this video, and some of it might be completely irrelevant, but I worked hard on it, so I don't care. I don't have many updates, but first of all, I do have some new raps out. Yeah, I do some rapping, some music on the side, and you guys can check that out. Link in description. Go listen to Groovy, Nerd Boy, Trust Me I'm Cool. I got some bangers. My Mutant Mayhem video will probably be the last of these kind of movie review videos. I really want to get back into longer topic videos. I love doing those, so look forward to that. I also have a collab with Haminations. Me and him are gonna rank Pixar movies. I'm editing that right now and it's super funny. I'm so excited. I hope you guys aren't too fed up with me talking about Pixar. I promise that will be the last one. I'm also taking a couple college classes soon, so things might slow down a bit, but they're about art and design, so maybe I'll get better, I don't know. Okay, done being quirky and silly. Thank you for all the support. You guys are awesome. Join my Discord server, subscribe, and stay awesome.